The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Thomas Sanjurjo. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Dom.
And Jack Baruzzini. Hey, Jack.
Hey, Dom.
Folks, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you are certain to enjoy called The Catholics of Oz. They recently celebrated their 100th episode, and now is a great time to start listening as they head into the next century of episodes. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Oz. I just want to mention, speaking of Catholics of Oz, I've been talking with Carolyn and Lindsay and Lino from the Catholics of Oz about hot dogs and ketchup. You know, whether you put ketchup on hot dogs. I did a poll on Facebook, and are you a ketchup or mustard person for hot dogs? And Carolyn says, well, we did tomato sauce. I'm like, is that ketchup? She's like, I don't think it is. So she went and found American ketchup, and now she's like, I'm a ketchup fan. And now I'm like, I want to find some Australian tomato sauce because I want to try that now. So,
right?
I found a website that sells all kinds of Australian foods to expats, like people living in the U.S., Australians, so they can get the taste at home.
That's funny. It sounds like when we lived in Chile for a little while, and there was nothing in the store, like nothing. You could get nothing in the store because they were still under embargo for everything.
Yeah.
And we went to a restaurant, and my mom found Heinz ketchup on the table, and she went and bartered with the owner of the restaurant and was like, "Can I take a case home?"
That's amazing.
For my dad, he'd like go to my mom. Yeah, put this in your purse.
Yep.
That was my dad thing. So that's a total non sequitur. Go ahead and listen to the Catholics of Oz, sqpn.com/Oz. So we do have some feedback from last time where we talked about browser extensions and content blockers. And Ben H on Discord had this to say. He said, if you're looking for a privacy-based browser like Brave, but prefer a Firefox base instead of Chrome/Chromium, check out LibreWolf. Its settings may take a bit of getting used to when it comes to what's blocked on the website and how it's displayed, but with each update and version, it's getting better at striking that balance between privacy and functionality. On mobile, there are various options for the same thing, such as Mull, Bromite, and Fennec. All Android, of course, Android mobile in that case, I think. Another good blocker extension is the EFF, so Electronic Frontier Foundation, Privacy Badger. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling all over that. Privacy Badger. Like Ghostery, it'll tell you how many trackers and other content items are blocked on each page, and you can toggle each item on or off if the blocking breaks something on the site. You can also report the page if the blocking still breaks the site after fiddling with the toggles. It claims to be learning how or what to block as you browse, but I'm not entirely sure how it works. That said, it's an extension trusted and recommended by the makers of a lot of privacy-focused browsers. Good. Very good, Brian. Thank you, Ben. That's good advice and good addition to the conversation. So let's get into today's main topic, and we're talking about migrating from Windows or Mac OS to Linux. We've talked about Linux before. We talked about gaming on Linux. We've kind of jumped around the topic, but I wanted to get right to the heart of the question. If someone has finally convinced this is the time for me, and I'm going to make the jump from the walled gardens to the freedom of Linux and climb out of the silo, or however you want to put it. And so and I can't think of two people better to talk to about it than Jack and Thomas. So guys, let's start with the question of, okay, I've made the decision. What's going to be different in the broad strokes? We can get into the details, but in the broad strokes, what's different between, am I going to experience differently in Linux than I am going to experience in Windows and Mac OS?
It's really going to depend on if you're coming from Mac OS or Windows. You're going to experience different things are going to be different. one of the good things about Linux is that it's very customizable so that you can make it feel a lot like whatever your previous operating system was. And that's really helpful when you're initially moving over. I think the biggest thing you're going to miss from both Windows and especially from Mac OS is probably the level of polish on things. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that you're going to notice the most. But for the most part, the functionality is, especially at this point, it's pretty straightforward.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the other thing that you'll notice too, coming from Windows or Mac, either one of them, to Linux, is the fact that there are a lot of different flavors of Linux. So if you're trying to make that jump, you're not going to be limited to the current version of Linux, because there is no current version of Linux. And we'll get into talking about distributions of the operating system in a minute. But that's the big thing you're going to realize, is that there's no one telling you how you have to Linux. Whereas with both Windows and Mac, you get the newest thing or you're not supported. I mean, Windows 10 or 11 maybe, but with Mac, definitely you're like on the latest version. That's it.
Right. You buy a computer, it's got the operating system on it, and that's that. Okay. So anything else on the broad strokes?
No, I don't think so.
Well, let's get into some of the details. You mentioned, coming over, it's there's not as much polish. I'm going to need to get my hands a little bit dirtier, dig into things a little more. What skills am I going to need to pick up as a Windows or Mac user now that I'm a Linux user?
I'm glad to say that at this point, there's to initially get into Linux, especially if you're just going to use it as your standard daily driver and you're not going to be doing a lot of different crazy configurations and stuff. It's actually not that difficult to do. Now, 10 years ago, it would be a total different story. But at this point, you can pick one of the common distros, install it, and you're pretty much good to go.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of skills you'll want to develop, but that's because you get into it and you start going, oh, hey, I could do this thing. Oh, hey, I could change this over there. And you'll want to play around with it. And so that's in any user that becomes a power user. They're going to want to develop skills with the bash, the command line tool. But if you're a person who tinkers anyway, you've probably learned how to do a little bit of that on Mac.
Right. Yeah. Yep. You can get very far in using the terminal and text-based commands on a Mac, which is a great way to begin.
Exactly. And then I think for Windows users, one of the things that Windows is still catching up on is having an app store. And when you come to Linux, one of the things you're going to notice is that you get your software from an app store. That's how you get your software for Linux. It's just that it's all free. And it's called a package manager, not an app store.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, on a Mac, it's like Homebrew is a kind of a analog to that. It's a program that has all kinds of software that it pulls in, installs on your computer, and that's the same sort of thing on Linux. Okay. And so let's
say one more thing to add there too is you'll want to get used to searching for alternatives to commonly used programs. That's something that you're going to do a lot of, and initially it can feel kind of painful, but once you get into that and once you get over having everything be perfectly polished and finished, and you get a program that works, but that's open source, that's got a great community behind it, you're going to love that aspect of it. It feels hard at first.
Can you give me an example of something like a program that you find an alternative for?
Yeah, absolutely. Photoshop's my favorite go-to because Photoshop's just so expensive, and it's good. But if you're not a big company and you need something fixed, it's just not going to happen. You've got the particular use case that you need, and you're not going to get any support for that. Whereas the alternative, which is GIMP on Linux, it's a free and open source. You can get it on Windows too if you want to, but it's free and open source alternative. The community is so great that if you go in and you start asking for a particular tool or a particular tool to work a certain way, there's probably somebody that's really attached to that tool, and they might pick up on what you are saying and say, oh, that's a great idea. And they can program it, and you might have a change almost immediately. And it's not based on how much money you can throw at.
Right. And I don't have to wait till next year's, big revision and wait 6 months down the road to get that. That's a great point. It's very much seems community based. It's very much people helping people as opposed to necessarily big corporations selling you stuff. I mean, that really feels like the Linux way.
Right. And one of the fun things about that is that eventually when you get to the point where you're, your way around Linux and you've gotten into like programming it and stuff like that, you can make those changes yourself if you so desire. No one's going to stop you.
That's true. That's true. So we've kind of danced around a little bit, and I think we've talked about this before, but let's talk about it here again. So we mentioned distros. What's a distro, and which is the best one for a newcomer to put it on their computer?
So a distro is basically, Linux is, there's the Linux kernel, which is like the underlying operating system for everything. And a distro is a particular flavor of that kernel that has additional packages on top of it, like the desktop environment, a lot of different customizations and things that go into it. That's essentially what a distro is. But I would say that if you're going to start off with Linux for the first time and you're first jumping into it, I would go with Linux Mint. It's very easy to install. Everything works right out of the box. It's the design language for it uses the Cinnamon desktop environment, and it looks a lot like Windows, but it's very customizable. Alternatively, Ubuntu is another really good one, and Mint is actually based off of Ubuntu, so they share a lot of the same bones. And I think people who are coming from Mac OS might be more comfortable with Ubuntu because it uses the GNOME desktop environment, and that is more of the Mac language, the design language, than Cinnamon is.
Okay.
Yeah. And both of them are incredibly easy to install. They just work. And they just work. And that's the great thing about them is that they, this is the one that I put on my wife's computer because she's not going to tinker with it. And it's Mint is the one that we use, and that's what it is. And the reason I went to Mint was because I spent many years working with one of the hardest distros to work with, which was called Arch. And Arch is one that it's bare bones. So it just takes the kernel and makes no opinions about how you do anything else. And so you start it up, and it can communicate with the hardware on your computer, and that's about it. And then you have to pick a desktop environment. You have to pick a file manager. You have to put all of this stuff together on top of it. So I wanted to do that because I wanted to learn, the really detail way. And sometimes you'll get to that point. Like you'll be fiddling around with Linux, and you're like, well, I want to see what's under the hood, and I really want to get in there and do it. And then just get Arch and go learn how to do all of that stuff from the back end. But eventually you'll go, okay, this is ridiculous. I'm tired of spending time fixing my computer. I just want to use it. Right.
Yeah. You can have your hobby computer on the side.
Exactly.
And then, the one you do work on, you get stuff done on.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like to, and of course, it again goes without saying it probably, but I'll say it. They're free. There's no cost to either of these. You just, if you have a computer, you can install this and get going from the start. So, what about apps? You mentioned GIMP as a substitute for Photoshop, but what about my other favorite apps? What am I going to use for web browsing and email and messaging and PDFs and all this sort of stuff I use on a daily basis to do basic stuff? Apart from work, just any computer use that we do.
The nice thing is that most of the common apps you're going to be using anyways are available. Chrome has a Linux distro. There's Firefox. Firefox is the default on most distros, actually. There's Thunderbird, which is a pretty good analog to Outlook if you're looking for that. A nice thing, though, is that a lot of these services that you're going to be using are web-based anyway. So the Microsoft web apps are really good using them in the browser. It's almost like using desktop Office. And then if you want to go desktop, there's both OpenOffice and LibreOffice, which are really good open source Office programs.
Okay.
Yeah. And your package manager is really good at interpreting your search for Office. You type in Office, it knows what you're looking for. You type in Photoshop, it knows what you're looking for, and it finds the package that's related to that thing.
And file formats are often, like a lot of these file formats nowadays are pretty cross-platform compatible. You know, if a lot of programs can output a Microsoft doc file now. You know, Microsoft and Adobe, especially they're the two big ones. They learned not recently, but a while ago, how important it is to have formats for their files that can be opened by other programs by becoming the standard. And so, if I work with people who send me Word docs, I can probably, if I could use the web-based one, like you said, Jack, like the web-based version of Word, Microsoft Word, but I could also use OpenOffice or LibreOffice and work with Word docs, no problem.
Absolutely.
So that's good.
Yeah.
And the only reason I would even really bother with the Microsoft web apps is if you're doing something in a corporate environment where they're going to want it to be that specific, there's a few specific features that go with Microsoft Office that are not in LibreOffice, but if it's not anything that's required, I would say just go with the open source versions.
Right. Yeah. Like, again, like my wife has a Mac and she uses Pages or whatever. She's just writing stuff for herself. Like, she writes stuff in notes, she's just doing for herself. She's not needing to trade it with people. So, those basic programs would probably be enough anyway, and then save the money on paying for Office. That's
exactly.
Okay. And there's a PDF program. I see someone put the note about what PDFs in the doc.
I threw one in. It's called Foxit. I'll use it if I need to do some more fancy PDF editing. And there's a few others out there that are open source. For the most part, though, I just use a browser to open PDFs.
Right.
Unless I need to edit it, and even then, there's a lot of ways to. I'm at the point where I just do that in the command line because there's a bunch of tools in the command line already built to do that.
Sure. Well, and that's the thing is, like, and I think you mentioned already, so much is in the browser nowadays anyway. Like, everything is a web app, whether it's Airtable, which is a database, or Slack, which is a communal messaging system, or Discord is or Facebook, or all these programs. Like, I look at all the apps on my computer, and most of them even have web versions that I could use, especially if one of the benefits we didn't mention is Linux runs on a lot of different hardware. It runs pretty light on things. In other words, it doesn't stress hardware. So a lot of these programs will run better even in the browser than they will on a Windows machine, even a relatively recent vintage one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the other great things about Linux is that there's so many different distros for so many different applications. You can get some more heavyweight ones, especially if you're looking at a lot of graphical stuff. I know Ubuntu has one called Ubuntu Studio, which just comes with tons of different programs for video and audio and photo editing. But on the other side, there's I think it's Raspbian, which is the Raspberry Pi Linux spin, and it's super lightweight because it runs on a Raspberry Pi.
Right. Yeah, I have a Pi, and yeah, it's been it's amazing just like how this fast little computer that could fit in my pocket, and it's just kind of amazing the thing. I did run into a problem with it where it stopped doing DNS resolutions. It could stop, and I ended up kind of abandoning it and using something else for what I was using it for. And I'm probably gonna have to reinstall the OS on it, which is kind of a thing. But hey, I can't talk. Just today, I had to reinstall for the umpteenth time Mac OS on my Mac Studio because there's something wrong with it, and it keeps doing that. So it's not like Linux has a corner on weird problems. So
right,
yeah.
Well, and when you get used to it too, like installing a new distro is really easy because you just go find one.
Right.
You don't have to pay $100, $300. You just go find one. Oh, this one looks interesting. Let me try this one out. You can try that one out. There you go. There's one that's like down to the kernel. The kernel has been rewritten for audio syncing. So if you're a musician and you want to make sure that all of the stuff that you do is syncing up perfectly by the timestamp on the computer. So if you're doing a lot of recording, Linux is a great option there because it's one of the very few that actually has the kernel built just for that purpose.
That's the interesting thing. And so much, maybe people don't realize so much of what we use out there, a lot of these web apps that we're using are running on servers that are running Linux. Much of what we think of as the internet is just Linux boxes running software.
And if you have an Android phone, you're running Linux.
Right. And let's be clear too, if you are on a Mac or an iPhone, there is a Unix kernel back in the deep in there. Like the Mac's operating system and the iOS systems are Unix at their heart. So there's a connection in there.
And I would say that if you use a Mac and you're familiar with the command line, you're going to have an easier time coming from a Mac than coming from Windows, because most of the commands are the same.
Right. Yes, that's true. I do use the terminal, the command line a lot, and I have recognized that a lot of this, I already understand sudo and man and directory commands and all that sort of stuff, and don't ever do rm dash. I won't even say it because I know these things already on my Mac. That's a good point. So speaking of iPhone and Android, how will I use those with Linux? Now, because with my Mac, I have my iPhone and my photos get sucked down into Photos app on my computer. And how am I going to do that with a Linux machine, whether I'm an iPhone or Android user?
This is where it starts to get a little more complicated, because this is where the environment kind of takes play, and you're going to have a harder time coming from Apple to Linux for that reason, because with Apple, everything just works together. That's by design. They just communicate well. It works together. Even the fact that Android is a Linux-based system, they don't communicate that way, because there's no assumptions made about what operating system you have and how that particular distro is going to handle certain items, or even what file management system you have on your distro. There's no cohesive way that they can just operate together. Now, that being said, a lot of those apps are available on Linux. So you're not going to be missing out on a lot of it, because, you can get a lot of those Apple apps for Linux so that you can run some things on your Linux system.
Okay.
Yeah, in my case, because I went from a MacBook and an iPhone to an Android phone and a Linux computer, and I use Google Photos for my photos. I have my Google Drive synced with my KDE account, and I use the Google Messages in the browser, which is similar to using iMessage on your Mac. And it's not as seamless, but it's 99% of the way there, I'd say.
Yeah. And this is another area where web apps are your friend. You can access, if you're an Android user, you can access all of the Google Cloud stuff from the browser. If you're an iPhone user, you can access iCloud from a browser and all the photo stuff. So it's not like you'd have to stop using those. You can still use them. It just won't be in a necessarily. It might. I think you're right. If what you're saying was true, is like that Apple is making some Linux apps for some of their services. But even without that, you can use the browser-based versions of that as well. So you can still have those. So that's good. And you said there's an open source Apple Music app as well.
Yeah, so Apple does not make a native Apple Music app, but there's an open source one called Cider, which I like the play on words there. And I've not personally used it, but just looking over what it provides, it looks pretty darn close to what you get on the Mac, and apparently it's got good reviews and it's well supported.
Interesting. And Apple allows it. Yeah, I suppose you have to log into your Apple account somehow in order for that to work. Okay. That is interesting. Yeah. So what about games? Can I play games on my Linux? I know we talked about this in a previous episode, but we should bring it up again.
Well, I mean, you have a Steam Deck, so you already are.
That's right. The Steam Deck is a small Linux computer. I assume the Switch is probably a Linux computer too.
I don't know what the back end of it is. Probably. Yeah. It would make sense. It's got a lot of compatibility with Steam, so I would imagine so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but this is a sticking point for a lot of people, and it used to be a really big problem. It is not as big a problem anymore. There are a lot of ways to play games on Linux. Steam is the best, honestly. Steam has a system called Proton inside of it that basically runs. There's this backend Wine program, which is Windows, or Wine is not an emulator. That's the recursive representation there. But it's kind of an emulator of Windows. And that's the way you used to have to do it, was you have to install Wine and do all these things on the back end to try and figure out how to get your game working. But nowadays, you just go get it on Steam. You open it up. You tell Steam that you want to run it with Proton. And I barely even question whether or not I can run a game if it's on Steam and is only Windows anymore. I just assume that it's going to work in Proton, or I'll just wait a little while. I bought Cyberpunk 2077 first day, and it worked better for me than it did for Windows users.
Wow.
So, yeah, you know what? Just go figure.
But I'm assuming that the same thing applies in Linux that it does in Windows or Mac. You want gaming hardware. Like, this isn't I can take my cast off, a business laptop, low-end business laptop, and play great games on it. You are going to need a good CPU and a good graphics card regardless.
Right. In some cases, you're also going to need better, just because you're running a layer between the game and the hardware that is translating the game to the hardware. So you do probably want at least as good as what's recommended for middle of the road for any game that you're going to play. Okay.
Yeah, I remember Jeff Geerling, who we had on as a guest a while ago, doing on his YouTube channel, trying to get like this high-end game, brand new game running on his, I think it was an Arch Linux computer, which that's probably why he was having troubles. But talking about trying to optimize it, he was trying to get it to run as fast as possible and that sort of thing. And again, if you like to tinker, that's great. But what we're saying here is you don't have to tinker necessarily. You just take the easier road too.
Yeah.
And if you're a person who doesn't like Steam, or if you have an account with Epic Games and some of the other providers that are out there, there's a network called Lutris. It's a app that you get from the apps, or from the package manager in Linux, and it does a lot of the same stuff that Proton does, but it can do it for multiple different loading environments. So you can have your Epic Games in there. You can have some other kinds of managers, and it just kind of bundles them all up in one. And I'll be honest, it does take a little bit more tinkering, and because most of my games are on Steam, I haven't really sat down to work with it very closely. But I did get it for Witcher 3 when I got that downloaded, and I wanted to run that and did not have it on Steam. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try and figure out how this works.
I am going to recommend folks go back and listen to our episode 188, where we talked all about gaming on Linux, and there's a lot more detail about all this there, and you'll want to get into that, and because there's a lot of great information there. So if you go to starquest.fm/TEC188, that'll get you there. So that's gaming. What about like antivirus and security software? Is Linux safe? Am I going to get hacked? Because like just today, Apple put out a 0-day security upgrade. By the way, if you have any Apple devices, run the operating system upgrades for those, because it is a dangerous 0-day exploit. Do I get anything protection on Linux?
So there's two sides to this coin. One, because Linux is open source, the code's out there, so people can see what the code is made of, and they can figure out how to exploit it. But that actually provides a lot of an advantage to the developers, because it means that a lot of people are sitting there looking at the code and figuring out how things are going to go wrong. And then, as you said, like a majority of the internet is actually run on Linux. And because of that, Linux has to be hardened. Like, it has to be really secure. Now, you're not assured any security from Linux that is better than other systems, but regularly there are security reviews that come up that say that Linux is safer than either Mac or Windows. So take it for what you will. That does not ever mean that you should not have an antivirus system. You need an antivirus system on your computer, regardless of what you have.
Right. And there's other security steps, and maybe that's a future topic for us, is to just talk specifically about security on Linux, and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's a first step anyway.
And one nice thing about the code being open is that there are no built-in backdoors for like government agencies or any corporate backdoors that are put in there, which other operating systems may have, but you may not know about because you can't look at the code.
Right. And that's important to emphasize. And I don't think we can emphasize it enough. Anyone can look at all the code. There's no, is that correct? Is like all of the code is available for anyone to look at in the operating system. So there's no hidden stuff. Unless hidden but through obscurity, but there's no walls to prevent you from seeing, proprietary information, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And they very often do code reviews too, which is part of the open source community, where they put the code out to specific groups and say, look, can you look at this and make sure that there's nothing wrong with it? And they have hackathons where people go in and attempt to break the code. And with Google, it's trial and error. Like if you're trying to hack Google stuff, or if you're trying to hack Windows, it's just trial and error. You just go and try a whole bunch of stuff. With Linux, you can just go look at the code and you go, I think this would be an exploit. I could probably try this. And that makes anything you try to do to hack it a lot better. Like you're not just stabbing around in the dark. You know exactly what the map is, and you know all the choke points, and you can try it out and figure out whether or not it works. And that makes it a lot more secure, because now we know exactly what you did to use that hack. We can go back and edit the code as the creators of Linux and make it even better.
Right. And it certainly doesn't mean that there aren't exploits for Linux out there that come up. There's been some notable ones in the news we've talked about in headlines in the past, where, various bits of open source software, and someone figures out, hey, wait, there's this exploit that we could use on this. But it gets fixed, or people, they take it out of their software and they replace it with something else because we can't fix that, or they're not willing to fix it, or whatever the reason is, and we move on. It's a lot more egalitarian in a sense, because it's a level playing field for everyone. So how do I start? What's my first step? I'm ready to go tomorrow. I'm a Linux guy. I'm not really. I'll have my Mac tomorrow, but let's just say I am. What do I do? Actually, I'm tempted to get to actually have a Linux computer to play with. Besides my Raspberry Pi, just to get started, maybe to give to my son, who's about ready to start his own journey, computing journey. That might be a good place for him to start. So how do I start? What steps do I take?
First thing you want to do is get a USB thumb drive. Pick out a distro you want to try out. You make a bootable image on the thumb drive, which is not hard to do at all. I would recommend using an old computer that you don't mind messing with. Plug it in, boot into the thumb drive, and you can just start playing with the operating system. You don't even have to install it right off the bat. You can use it from the thumb drive, and then if you decide that's the one you want, you go through the install process, and it's pretty much just clicking through and setting things up.
Okay.
Yep. It's that easy. It really is. It's a very, very simple process. And there's a lot of options out there too that allow you to dual boot, so that you can have a Windows machine and a Linux machine existing on the same device. And that's not a bad idea if you have enough disk space, or if you want to put a new disk in your system. If you've got a desktop that you can just throw an extra disk in, and you want to try and just boot Linux in side by side with Windows, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like fun. It sounds easy. So, what kind of hardware do I need? What should I get? Do I need to get a new computer to do this, or can I use my old computer?
That's the good thing about Linux, is that it does run pretty lightweight. There's a lot of good distros out there designed specifically for older hardware. There's Ubuntu, I think is how you pronounce it. It's a very lightweight version of Ubuntu. CentOS is another good one. And they're very light on resources. And I actually have a laptop that I think it's almost 15 years old, and I just put Linux on it the other day, and it runs fine. So that's honestly the best way to get into Linux is if you have an old computer that you just want to mess around with, put Linux on it, and it's going to run 100% faster than it is on whatever previous operating system it's on.
Oh yeah, definitely. If you got something that's dying and you want to bring it back to life, put Linux on it.
Yeah,
it'll overwrite whatever's there, and then you have a brand new system that operates. It just works. It's amazing how often this will happen too. And I'll a lot of times when I'll go to people and they have something that's unfixable or that I can fix it, but it's going to be too expensive, and they're like, well, I might as well just go ahead and get a new computer. Then I'll ask, hey, can I just take this one? And they're like, yeah, I'm just going to throw it away. And I'll take that home, put Linux on it, and there you go. Now I've got a new computer for my kids.
Mhm.
Okay. And can I do it with Macs? Can I put Linux on an old Mac?
If you want an adventure.
So Intel Macs, yes. The M1 Macs, there are some experimental projects going on right now, but I don't think it's really ready for prime time.
But on one of the older the pre-Silicon Macs, the older Intel Macs, I think I did that once a long time ago. I put Ubuntu on an old Mac for a little while just for fun. And then I got scared and came back, but it was in the old days when it was still kind of janky and hard. So it may be time for me to. I've got a stack of old Macs in a closet here, so it may be time for me to try it.
That's the great thing about it, though, is that I actually got into Linux initially. I was probably 15 or 16, and I had a laptop that I needed for school, and it was this beat up old. I think it was a Compaq.
Nice.
Yeah, that's how old it was. And it had Windows on it, but it was running horribly, but I still needed to use it. So I ended up putting Linux on it. And that's how I initially got into Linux. And it helped me to learn a lot about how to even work with a computer beyond just using it. And I mean, it ran fine for probably another like 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yep. By the way, young men, if you're listening, we're all married. We have kids. You can be a nerdy, geeky teenager and grow up to have a girl that likes you and wants to marry you and have a family with you.
And puts up with your work, with your tinkering with computers too.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, usually because it gets you a good job.
This is true too. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, and girls, by the way, lots of girls who are fun, geeky types. My own mother-in-law, Pat, who's on the show with us all the time, she's about the nerdiest, geekiest woman I know, and it's an awesome thing. So
now I
definitely
do have to recommend 2 websites if you are interested in getting a Linux laptop, like a laptop that has no operating system on it or that comes with Linux pre-installed. There is a website called laptopwithlinux.com, and they have some pretty good laptops that come with Linux pre-installed. You pick your flavor of Linux, you put it on. Mostly they tend toward Mint or Ubuntu. But I mean, even if you got that, you can easily replace it if you wanted to try something else with what you have. The other side of it is there's this one called System 76, and they make some phenomenal looking laptops and other types of desktop computers that have Linux installed on them. So I highly recommend them if either one of those two, if you're interested.
Cool.
If you have to have a new system to put Linux on.
Mm-hmm.
if you want an excuse to spend some money.
Yes. I would also say System 76 has their own flavor of Linux. It's based off Ubuntu called Pop! OS. That's actually really good for getting into Linux, and they've designed it specifically to be a good jumping off point for people.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's come up on the show before as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds like fun. If you're a tech geek, I mean, and you get an extra old computer laying around, there's no reason not to do this. Just to learn something new, expand your horizons. I mean, this is where I'm definitely going to do this. I've decided I'm going to drag out my wife's got an old Dell. This thing is probably close to 20 years old, but I may drag it out and see what happens.
So the other side of that is I have the computer that I run right now is a 10-year-old computer. Well, actually, it's probably more like 13 years old. And it still runs great. Like I still can run AAA games. Now I bought it really powerful at the time. I specifically designed it to be really powerful at the time. but it has not degraded. And that's the thing, is like, you get a Windows machine and you have it for this long, it's going to degrade. There's just going to be a bunch of buildup of junk on it. And eventually you're just going to have to get a new machine. With this one, I just install a new operating system, back up all my files, install a new operating system, pull all my files back over, good to go. And I've only had to do that once in the whole time that I've had it.
What do you use for backup, by the way? I don't think we brought that up.
I actually run a cron job. I got in the command line and wrote a cron job to run backups for myself. But there are backup softwares that are made specifically for Linux machines.
Okay.
And if you're smart about it, you don't need to run the backup quite as often, because you can put the backup on a network mounted drive and use that network mounted drive to do your backup. And Linux handles that really well. It's really good at dealing with that kind of stuff, because essentially you can separate out the operating system from the file system, and your files live somewhere completely different than the actual operating system itself.
Right. Mm-hmm. If you have a reasonably fast network, you could live off the files on the network drive, is what you're saying. Okay. Yep. Yeah, that's pretty good. Awesome. Making me think.
Join us.
I bleed six colors. I mean, this. I'm never leaving Macs behind, but I will certainly. By this time, by the fall, there'll probably be a Linux computer sitting on my desk besides the Steam Deck. Yeah.
Awesome.
Our diabolical plan is working.
I'm not converting. I'm only taking a step into the pool.
I was going to say, you say that now.
Oi, Kavelt. It's like I'm going to leave the Catholic Church and become Jewish. This is like, I feel like I'm making a big commitment here, a big step. Anyway. All right, let's move on. I hope that's been helpful to folks. And if you've at all interested in Linux and you have other questions, we'd love to get them from you. And if you have any advice for people that we didn't cover, we'd love to hear from you as well. You can send your questions or tips into technology@sqpn.com. We're going to go into headlines in a second. I want to thank patrons, but I do want to also a little bit of an announcement. There won't be an episode of Secrets of Tech next week as we record this. If you're listening to this sometime in the future, you can ignore that. But we're taking a bit of a summer break at SQPN and StarQuest. And so we're going to take a week off from most of our shows. Several of our shows that are pre-recorded will still be coming out, but they will be back the following week, so just so folks know. And I want to take a moment now to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Technology, including Tara H., Francis B., Carla K., Marilyn K., and Kip C. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Technology and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So let's talk about some headlines. The first headline is from the UK's The Guardian, and it concerns a breakthrough in stem cell research where some researchers have devised a way to create synthetic human embryos using stem cells. And they call them model embryos. They assure us that they won't ever be implanted and to grow to be a full human being that's been gestated and born. They don't have a beating heart or the beginnings of a brain. And I tried to read this pretty carefully. I'm not a embryologist or a scientist of this sort, but this whole thing feels kind of hinky to me. Does it feel weird to you guys? Does this seem like we're creating human beings to kill them? Is that really what's going on here? What do you guys think of this?
I'm not an ethicist or a biologist, so I can't speak fully, but it does definitely raise a lot of, this is like the replicants from Blade Runner, and we're going to make a race of slave humans or something. But yeah, it seems creepy and weird, and they're using embryonic stem cells, which is an issue in of itself to begin with.
Right.
So
the only way to get those is to abort a child. Right.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take the opposite stance here and say it's interesting because it's like a cancer cell, right? But it's like it's a positive cancer cell in the way that a set of cells that can continue to grow and develop itself. And that's the only way I could justify this. Now, ethically, I think there's a lot of questions here, but I don't feel like this is ever something that could become a human. So it's not like what they're taking is an actual embryo that could become a human, but they're just growing clean cancer cells, essentially.
That was the question, because the language of this, at some points it sounds like we're just growing structures, and then at other points they're saying we're cultivating the embryos to a stage just beyond the equivalent of 14 days of development for a natural embryo. And it's like, well, so what are we actually doing then? Because embryo is an embryo, right? Or am I wrong? And I kind of wish I had an expert who could tell me what's going on here. But the bigger issue here is the dangers of, one of the things they say, well, we just don't know enough about this stage of human development. We don't know about this stage of growth of human beings. We can't study it without doing this. And there's a question of well, then should we study it? Like,
right.
Is the fact that we don't know reason enough to do a thing when there is questions about the morality and ethics of it?
My biggest problem with it is actually not a moral one, but a question of what exactly they're accomplishing, because this is a single set of embryonic stem cells that they're replicating over and over and over again. And if all you do is study a single human being many, many, many times, you're not getting a different result. You're getting the same human being many, many, many times. And that's essentially the same thing that they're doing here. Now, they may have a bulk of them. They may have a set of them, but that's still not a representative set. That's not enough to say this is like we're doing a study on a completely new strain when they've just copied the same strain over to a new set, right? And that's what they always end up talking about, all of the research we can do. And it's like, well, what do you really research? I mean, you're researching this same set of things over and over and over again. Really, shouldn't you move on to something new?
Yeah.
I would assume that it allows them to research an earlier stage of human development and the way cells self-assemble and replicate that you cannot do otherwise. And that really, I would be interested to hear from a bioethicist, like from the Catholic point of view, about if you could accomplish this same kind of thing and make these same kind of, I guess you could call them like golem embryos out of non-embryonic stem cells, would there be a moral issue?
Right. They talk about how, this one group of researchers using stem cells from mice have worked to, create the beginnings of a brain and a beating heart and an intestinal tract. And I'm like, if you do that with human cells, that seems to cross a line for me. I mean, once you've got, that's really that's a clear line. Even before that, I have problems. And I understand what I think what they're trying to study, which is differentiation. How do we go from stem cells, which can become anything, and how do they decide to become heart, brain, muscle? How does that function? How does that work? And I get that. I just don't know whether the price is worth it. And that's the thing. Maybe that we need an ethicist to help us navigate this issue. But it's something certainly to keep in mind and to keep an eye on and to be aware of, because these issues only become more and more, and they're very technical, and it's easy for us to kind of get lost and say they must know what they're doing and be okay with it. All right. From the deep to the ridiculous. Let's, but this kind of goes to this next story kind of goes to sort of social contract of the internet. So there's a website called fandom.com. They host wikis, and wikis are user editable sites. Wikipedia is the most famous. Anyone can go in and edit and add in or subtract or change information on these pages, and then other users can go back. It's sort of like Linux, where someone can do something ridiculous, but because anyone can edit, you kind of trust the crowd to create something that's usable for everyone and it won't be ruined by a few bad actors. Okay, so that's fandom. They're a commercial company, but they host a lot of these, and they have like a Star Trek one that I use all the time, and a Doctor Who one, and various Stargate one. There's one. So they also have a McDonald's one where they maintain an unofficial McDonald's history. And they have all of those marketing characters. They have the Ronald McDonald, the Hamburger page, and there's a page for Grimace. And unless you're a Gen Xer, you might not know who Grimace is until recently. But
I was going to say until recently, yeah.
Yeah. Grimace is this big purple kind of fluffy character, which I think he has something to do with the shakes. Like Hamburger's about the burgers, you know what I mean? Like each of the different characters of historical all had connection to one of the food things, and I think he was like a shake one. In any case, McDonald's is doing a big promotion regarding the character Grimace, and like there's a Grimace meal, and they went to fandom and paid them to take over the Grimace page and turn it into a big advertisement for their campaign. And that's the heart of the problem that's been brought up by a lot of people, which is there's a social contract with wikis. Is you can't just turn a page into an advertisement that other people have contributed to and helped create. It's not, it violates the unspoken and sometimes spoken social agreement. What do you guys think of this?
Well, it just shows that they don't actually understand or care how much work people put into these wikis. Like, they essentially get free content by hosting this, and that generates a lot of ad traffic for them because fandom's really popular. They have pages for almost anything, apparently McDonald's, which I didn't know about. But once you start doing things like this, no one is going to put in that time and effort because they're not getting paid when they're writing this content. Yeah. No one's going to put in that time and effort to work on these pages and craft what they're doing if they think it's just going to get taken over by some corporate advertisement.
It's a great way to lose your fandom.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I'm like working on a Secrets of Doctor Who episode, sometimes I will have just, watched an episode or listened to an audio story, and I'm like, oh no, this is wrong. Let me fix that. And I'll just, I'll make an edit and put some stuff in. But if none of that matters, if somebody can come in and just wipe it out, then I'm not going to bother. I mean, I'll use the site, but I'm not going to contribute. So I think that's part of the problem is this idea that fandom is making all this money off of the free will work of these volunteers, which this is a big issue right now because of other companies out there like Reddit, which is also there's a big conflict between the volunteers who create the content that make Reddit what it is and the company that wants to make money. And that's a big conflict.
And the problem is the way wikis work is that they're governed by consensus. And that's why you can't just go on a wiki and completely just mess it up. I mean, you can go in there and delete everything and just write whatever you want, but it's going to get switched back really quick because other people are invested in keeping that content up there and keeping that content accurate. And if that can just be overridden by fandom, then no one's going to put in that effort anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the commentary was like the guy who's been working on this Grimace page was like, I mean, what's the point? I'm not going to do this anymore because what's the point if they can just change it back? And once you lose that person, you lose that person. That person's not not going to come back. And because it's not that you've like made them lose interest for a little while and they'll be back. They were passionate enough about this to sit down and do it, and you just stole that, and they're not going to be passionate about it anymore after that.
There are not a lot of Grimace fans out there with the knowledge to fill a page about a McDonald's marketing character from 30 years ago. And that's the thing is these are the people maintaining this unofficial McDonald's history, this McDonald's wiki, are the company's fans. These are the people who know this stuff, and you're treating them like garbage. Yeah.
McDonald's should have hired this guy to write the Grimace ad campaign for the shake.
Why would you not have done that?
Right.
It's
right.
ridiculous.
Yeah. There's so many other ways they could have done something. They could have, instead of taking over the page, put something on the page in cooperation with the guy who had contributed the most, or something along those lines. You know, put an ad on the page. You know, we expect to see ads on these sites now. So put an ad on the page, which is just to completely take it over and disregard the work of someone else because he's not the corporation. Yeah, it's not good. So our last headline is interesting, and it kind of betrays a bit of a bias from older generations to younger generations, because it's the Wall Street Journal, and the headline, or no, I'm sorry, it's Insider. It's not Wall Street Journal, Business Insider. And it says, Gen Z is taking courses on how to send an email and what to wear in the office. Oh, according to a Wall Street Journal report. So their Insider's just recycling Wall Street Journal's content. Good job. So it's talking about how like these Gen Zers are coming out of college and they don't know how to talk to people in their office and how to dress and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, but this isn't new. Like, this has always been the case where young people have had to have training in how to office etiquette, what to wear, how to attend a business lunch, right? Am I wrong? I mean, is this not something that has always been taught? Life skills that have been taught to kids for ages, right?
It's just the latest version of the younger generation is horrible and stupid and look how dumb they are, when every previous generation has been that younger generation at some point.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and the trades are really suffering from this. I've read a lot of open letters from people who are trying to get into the trades, who are young people, and they go into the trades and they'll be like an apprentice to an electrician, and all the electrician does is complain about how much they don't know. And they're like, I'm apprenticed to you for the purpose of learning how to do this stuff. How can I know this stuff if I'm apprenticed to you and you're supposed to be teaching me, you know? So yeah, I think there is a lot is taken for granted in how, I don't know, like, it's amazing that we have these resources. How resourceful is it that the Gen Zers are not being taught this by someone, and so they're teaching each other by going on YouTube and sharing videos about how to do it? Right. That's awesome.
And TikTok videos and that sort of stuff. Right.
Yeah.
That is true. Now, one of the things that comes up in the article is talking about how the events of the past three years since the pandemic and so much remote work has left a lot of young workers without those skills that you learn. They've been working for a company remotely for 1, 2, or 3 years. And, you know, by this point, they should have a lot more of those office skills that they don't have. And now they're being called into the office. I can see that being a thing that you might need to have special onboarding things for people who's worked for you for a while, but need to understand how an office environment works versus remote work.
I can't wear your PJ bottoms into the office. Don't do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it also, I don't know if y'all saw the stuff about the quiet quitting thing.
Yeah.
Which was basically just propaganda for shaming people who had deigned to not go above and beyond and just do what they were hired to do. I feel like this is that same vein where it's a lot of corporations are really upset that the traditional work structure has been upset by the pandemic, and they really want people back in the office even when you don't need people in the office for a lot of these kind of jobs in the first place. And it just feels like more backlash from that.
Because what's a manager do if he's not like standing over your cube asking you for your TPS reports and cover sheets?
Exactly.
You know, I think
gonna need you to come in on Saturday.
I mean, I think a lot of times, like this is only like anecdotally, but the idea that I have a feeling in some corporations, these middle managers suddenly don't have much to do because people are just doing their jobs without having to have someone stand next to them, making sure they're doing their jobs. You know, I think there's a little of that. Yeah. The quiet quitting thing. Yeah, that one bugged me because that betrays this idea that young people who work are supposed to not put in 40 hours that like they've been contracted and are being paid to do, but should put in 60 to show that they're part of the team. well, then pay me to do my work. Like,
Yeah.
Or yeah, you should be you should be going above and beyond. And it's like, well, when you don't even really give me a clear indication of what I should be doing for my job, how do I go above and beyond? You know?
Right. So I think it's a case of Gen Z being given the short end of the stick, like the millennials were before them in a lot of ways. So I'm glad that things are available for people who need it, but let's not. We need to stop whitewashing or stereotyping is the word I'm looking for. Stereotyping whole generations of people, people, individuals.
And also, this article is basically like making fun of people for attempting to learn things and better themselves.
Right.
Like you realize there's a problem. You went to get some correction for the problem, and the thing that bothers me is like they did not feel like there was someone they could reach out to in a person-to-person way in their office environment. That's troublesome. And that's and then this article is exactly why, because they didn't want to be, made fun of or pigeonholed for being a Gen Zer and not knowing this stuff, Yeah,
you ought to know it. You just should absorb it from the atmosphere. All right. So those are our headlines. So let's move on to talk about our picks of the week. And Thomas, I'll let you go first. What's your pick this week?
All right, so I'm keeping the open source train running here. My kids and I have started making a video game again, which we do from time to time. And I think I've mentioned this program before, but I don't know that I've actually picked it as a pick of the week. And I went and checked the pick of the week because I was like, have I? But no, this is a game engine. Now, if you don't know, you can actually get Unity and Unreal Game Engine for free and can start developing games in them for free. It's not until you make a game and actually start selling the game that you have to start paying for Unity and Unreal. But this game engine, this is an open source game engine that you can contribute to. It's called Godot or Godot.
Yeah.
Everybody says it differently.
Yeah.
So, but it's a great game engine. They just released version 4, and I feel like it is 100% a competitor for Unreal or Unity, either one. I love it. I love the community. If there's something that you need, again, this goes back to that whole concept of if there's something that you need and you mention to the community that you need it, you're very likely to get a response and to get something built into the program specifically for whatever your challenge is. And there's a lot of YouTubers that I follow that use this engine that have had exactly that happen, especially with this newer version that came out. Some of the things they were asking for slid into this newer version. So steep learning curve because it is a game engine, but there are so many YouTube videos available. And I just sat down for 3 hours this weekend and put together the bare bones of a first person shooter that I was going to do with my kids. So we're going to do like a first person perspective RPG. I got a little capsule that's got arms that move around and you can see them in the screen, and there's collisions and everything. It works. And it took me like 3 hours to put together along with doing the tutorials to do it. So definitely recommend it if you have a kid that's interested in video game design. Great place for them to start.
Excellent. Well, my son has just started this journey. He's been doing Tinker for about a month and a half, the website Tinker, and it's been pretty amazing to see he's starting to get ideas. So this is cool. I'm filing all this stuff away. So
there you go.
Excellent. Jack, what's your pick this week?
My pick of the week is the company Framework. They make currently a 13-inch laptop that is modular and designed to be upgraded so you can extend the life of it. And it's not just like with most laptops or most Windows laptops where you can swap out the RAM or maybe the hard drive. It's designed to be completely user openable. You can open it up. You can swap out the main motherboard that has the processor on it. All the components, you can take them out. They have very detailed guides on how to do the repairs on everything, and they sell all the components. So like the screen, the speakers, the batteries, everything is user replaceable, and they use like magnetic clasps to hold the computer together and standard size screws, so you don't have to get any sort of weird ones. Another feature that is really cool about it is that they have these modular bays on the side. You can get these little cards. So you get like USB-C or USB-A or whatever kind of ports you need. You can swap them out with the cards on the side, so you can customize it based on what you need. It just looks like a really cool project. I'm in that boat where I don't currently need a new computer right now, but I think if I get one, this is definitely what I'm going to go with. And the nice thing is they have a lot of community support in Linux, so you can go with that if you want. It also does support Windows.
Yeah. I mean, you could get it pre-built with Windows pre-installed, like for more, but you can also get a DIY edition that you build yourself and then you install Linux and there you go.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I've seen the videos where if you get the DIY edition, they ship you like the box of the parts and you put them together, and it's pretty straightforward to put together. So
that's fun.
Really cool. I like this movement in technology to be more user repairable.
Cool. Excellent. So my pick this week is something that came up because of recent, it was stuff in the news. Canada is on fire, apparently, and has been sending smoke and, all kinds of the particulates in the air down through the Northeast, the central part of the United States, and all that sort of stuff, and been causing difficulties breathing for anyone who has, even folks who don't have breathing problems, but everyone in my family all have asthma and various other breathing problems. So I picked up a couple of these Levoit, I would say because I took French, but Levoit air purifiers that are pretty good. Each one, it says it can cover up to 1,000 square feet. So most of my small house. My house is 1,400 square feet, but I've actually gotten one for each of our bedrooms and put it in there, and it runs pretty much all the time. And it has a high power mode, but it also has a low power, like quiet mode, and even has the benefit of being able to turn off all of the glowy bits, the blue LEDs, so it's completely dark at night.
Yeah,
and it's really it's effective. Everyone in my family has said that they definitely feel like it's helped them sleep at night. It has one filter that you can clean every. I have a reminder set for me to clean them. I wipe them off with a cloth once a month, and then you replace them, I think, every 6 months. And the filters are not that expensive. What was it? I forgot to look it up, but the filters are like $30 for a filter, and so it's really reasonable. And it also does, it's HEPA for pet hair and all that sort of stuff, so there's not a problem. So, and it's $100, which is really good price. That's for a decent air filter, that's a good price. I have another air filter that I got for this office that I'm in right now. That's a smart one. I'm going to talk about that in a future pick of the week, but I wanted a smart one so that I could control it remotely and automatically, so that it's not like running loud while I'm trying to record a podcast. But that's a future pick. But the Levoit is a nice one that I can recommend. So definitely, especially if you've been suffering from these wildfires, something I recommend. Excellent. All right, so that does it for this time. We would love to hear your feedback on anything we've talked about this time. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/technology, or the StarQuest Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to technology@sqpn.com. Or please visit the StarQuest Discord community, which is a great community, at sqpn.com/Discord. And if you don't know what Discord is, or if you're intimidated by it, don't be. It's really easy to use. Definitely just come by and check it out. Just come in and see what it's like, and then go from there. Everyone wants to be very helpful to all the new users, so definitely come check us out. You can find links from our discussion and our picks of the week on our show notes at starquest.fm/TEC220. Please write a review of the show in Apple Podcasts or any of the podcast directories that allow you to write reviews, and share the podcast with your friends. Help us grow this community and reach more listeners with, I think, some really helpful technology tips and news and all that sort of thing. Until next time, Jack Baruzzini, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of technology.
Thanks, Tom.
Thomas Sanjurjo, thank you as well.
It's been great.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.